I wonder if I would be better off drawing the talk rather than walking it. But I must tell you also that I've been to many, many TED Talks before this, because my father's name was Ted. And his wife and my mother, when she told me that I started drawing at a very, very tender time in life, at the age of 3, and she said that I had single-handedly destroyed their house by drawing pictures of aeroplanes and cars and trucks and ships and tractors and whatnot on every available square inch of place on the pristine walls of their beautiful house. And the joke was that all the rooms in the house were drawing rooms. But I think my first successful drawing was again early in school, where I drew a picture of the beloved Hindi teacher. Well, he was drawable, and some would say he was a very picturesque man. And this slip of paper was passed around the classroom, and there were bits of laughter, bits of giggling. And unfortunately for me, the paper got back into the hands of the teacher, and he was far from amused. I was given a sound thrashing, and later that evening made to attend a detention class where I had to write 100 times, "I will not draw funny pictures of my Hindi teacher." And I think this was the early understanding of the expression that a picture is truly worth 1,000 words. I think these drawings first started when there was talk of our old family home coming down to make way for a big new apartment block. Well, it was a gracious and spacious bungalow with a big garden in which grew 40 fruit trees. Also growing in the house and the garden were 10 children. And when their friends came over every evening, well, exciting stories unraveled themselves by the minute. And when I looked around, there were so many of these beautiful old structures just coming down to make way for the new Bangalore. And I couldn't help but step back and admire them for their graceful lines and their delicate proportions. And I decided to draw them with a sense of happy nostalgia to counter the bits of sadness one felt to see them come down so fast. At first I drew them for myself, but when I showed them to people of my age and older, some of them would sit down and say, "Do you remember?" and go into a story of their own. And sometimes even a wild, exciting anecdote. And all this would come back to my table for one more drawing. But there was another audience of younger people, my children and even theirs, who looked on and said, "Dear God, is this how our parents went about life in this most laid-back fashion more than half a century ago?" And I think these responses made me want to draw this legendary city at that legendary time. Well, when India gained independence in 1947, Bangalore, like many other cantonment towns all over the country, had settled down into a very peaceful way of life. And nothing much really happened for the next 50 years. But the one thing that differentiated Bangalore from these other cantonment towns was the existence of this exotic eclectic character called the pensioner. And he went about town all well-dressed and well-mannered. He went about town polite and very proper. And he had no objection to raise a glass to toast the passing of another glorious Bangalore evening. And I think it's in this carefree and abundant atmosphere that I wanted to base these drawings in, to soak these drawings in. This was probably the first of this series of work. And I remember sitting opposite the Plaza Theatre on MG Road and watching the traffic gently float past. And it was dusk, and the street lamp set has come on. And these buildings in front of me were bathed in a beautiful light. And at that moment, a story came to my mind of this aunt of mine who had taken her family to the theatre to see the movie Gone with the Wind. And when they came out at midnight after the movie, they found all four tires of their car gone with the wind. So it was that mildly humorous story, coupled with this beautiful sight in front of me, that made me want to draw it. And by now I realized that this was going to be part of my work for a long, long time. In fact, the next 30 years it happened to me. And so I wanted to understand it before I really went into doing this work, just for its consistency, for its continuity. And I realized that when an idea comes to you, it's a very passionate business for a cartoonist especially, of anybody. But for me it was a very passionate business and not easy to talk about. So when an idea comes to you, I realized very quickly that you can't dash up to that devil of a pencil sitting on your table and saying, pick me up and draw. You learn to wait and let it come to you slowly and peacefully and let it drop into your mind. And the further down it sinks into your mind, it would collect like-minded ideas and interesting information that would gravitate towards it. There is no structure to this process. There is no formula that tells you it's going to work or not. It's just time. And the further down it sinks, and if you let it go to the bottom of your mind, there it would collect all kinds of riches. It would collect small ideas which would come and cling on, and they seemingly negligible ideas, but they cling on, and these would give it all the glitter and the glamour that the big idea is looking for. And when it's ready, it would automatically then go up to the top of your mind. And once it's there and catches the right wind, you know you've got a story to tell. My only hope is that ChatGPT or some super intelligence doesn't hasten this beautiful, peaceful, rewarding process. The other things I needed to understand was, what do these drawings contain? Because I was never satisfied with just drawing, a well-known landmark, or for that matter, a pretty building known for its architectural values. I needed to add life to it. And life came in many ways. The most important of those being the greenery and the trees and the foliage that surrounded every old Bangalore building. There were the people, and the people of those days they were characters, let me tell you. There were the animals and the birds that were an integral part of the old Bangalore house. And of course the transport that was used just oozed character. The youth of the 70s were a very fashionable lot. The boys wore bell-bottom pants, and they wore their hair all long, like hippie style. And the barbers were very disappointed in us. They said we were bad for business. And I continue to be bad for business. The girls wore things like Juliet sleeves, and they wore things like elephant pants. And some of them had a small twist of hair that dropped down their foreheads, called a kiss skirt. Now these were small details that just added color to the bigger picture. The other aspect I needed to include in my work was the use of humor. And I tried to understand how to use it effectively, because it couldn't be a strong, laughing matter. It had to be delicately done. And with humor, one needs to know exactly where to draw the line. Are you laughing with somebody? Are you laughing at somebody? So I found that with a delicate use of humor, someone looking at the drawing could enter it at their own time, at their own pace, and with their own experience of that spot. So I realized that humor had to be used delicately and responsibly. Now that's an example of violent humor. And by now you're getting ready to start drawing. And that is a long and beautiful and very difficult process. Maybe the subject of another talk. Well, to end, just a thought. When India got independence in 47, Bangalore had already seen a long and colorful and rich history spanning centuries of time. Right from, the Hoysala emperors to Kempegowda, who founded Bangalore, to the Marathas, the Mughals, the Mysore Wadiyar Maharajas, and of course 200 years of the British. And all these people left a mark of their identity deeply embedded in the fabric of our history. After independence, the government of India decided Bangalore was the ideal destination to set up big public sector undertakings, to set up large factories, industries, to set up institutes of higher learning, the Institute of Science. And all this attracted millions to come and live and work. But the voice of the city was powerful and commanding, and also very charming. And the people listened to that voice. Well, years later, at the turn of the century, again Bangalore opened her arms to welcome the new IT industry and everything that came with it. The pub industry and our glorious weather were able supporters. And again, millions and millions of people came to Bangalore to live and work. But the voice of the people was growing louder. Sometimes one heard a voice of dissent. Sometimes you heard a clamor. Sometimes you heard a cacophony of loud voices. And today, 2023, voice of the people has become loud and commanding and demanding. And the city seems to be losing her voice. And we can't let that happen, because a city is a giver. A city was born to give, and that can't be reversed. So my question is, where do we go from here? Where do we draw the line? because none of us sitting here would like to remember this beautiful city from a funny picture hanging on the wall.